It's always been Ethel. Chicken, wake up, we got to tidy your room now.
Although it may have looked as if, you know, there was more of a pop sensibility on this record, I think sort of Know What I Like was in part an accident. Often when we tried to chase things, you know, we failed miserably. And I think we got to learn really that when we were ourselves and allowed things to happen, that we seemed to have more success and resonance with audiences.
I had this guitar riff that went ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong, and around the time of rehearsing Foxtrot, I remember putting the guitar through Tony's Leslie cabinets, and Phil and I used to jam on this thing, and no one else was that keen. They said it sounds too much like the Beatles. We're not going to do it. And following album, Phil and I are still jamming away on the same thing, you know, playing it like idiots, and the whole band joined in. It became a jam, it became a song, it became a hit.
You must understand that the word pop was, we grew up with the Beatles, the best band in the world, and they were pop. You know, this word pop's become something different now. A great song is a great song. Although we were writing not that at all, to different pieces, you know. And I suppose I know, like, one of the first songs we actually were able to sort of take a short, simple idea and develop it, rather than, like we often do, have a small, too many bits in a song, you know. We just took one riff and sort of made it into a song, which is great. I mean, it's sort of a real character piece too, with Pete's lyric too, I think.
I never really loved the chorus, which, I mean, you know, of course I like my sections, but I think, you know, that was one of Tony's melody on the da 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 da, and after a while I got very bored of it. But it was fun playing the sort of jerkier and jumpier melodies of the verse, and doing that with Phil, and then getting into this more floaty, simple chorus line.
Firth of Fifth was one of those things where Tony just sort of, you know, we'd all get together to play each other our bits, of which he had hundreds, and Mike had quite a few, and Peter had a few, and we'd be steamrolling into playing Firth of Fifth.
Firth of Fifth was, well, obviously it's a kind of like a very strong sort of keyboard moment from the early years, and the way the guitar solo evolved is quite interesting, really, because I'd written, as I say, the three bits, and the second bit I'd written was just really a flute and piano melody, and I'd just seen it as that. And we were playing it, well, we'd played it a few times, it sounded really nice, and then one time Steve said, you know, started playing it, you know, and he started playing it sort of like this, and I thought, oh, great, and I started to put the mellotron in, big chords like this. And it was almost like a joke. We were kind of doing it sort of like a la King Crimson, is how we saw it. I was just doing this overblown thing, and I thought, actually, that's really good, this. So we then sort of, you know, so for the reprise of that melody, when it came in the second half of the song, we said, well, let's do it this big way and see how it works, and it worked really well. And it gave a chance for Steve to actually do a sort of proper guitar solo.
Tony's melody, which I tried to interpret in a kind of slightly sort of Middle Eastern sort of way. I was bending all the notes, and I remember one or two people said, oh, it sounds a little bit Indian, almost like a sitar, and there was a note that I was able to sustain that would work 9 times out of 10 at the top. You do a high F sharp, and just with proximity to the speaker cabinets, it fed back. So it sounded like I had perfect sustain on every note. I didn't, but I was able to fade in the notes on the beginning of it and sort of wait for it, coast over a sort of atmospheric section, and then play this melody, which I think, although it was written as a piano melody originally, it became a flute melody, and then it became this guitar melody, and it's kind of become Genesis' most well-known guitar solo.
Once again, it's a nice section. You know, it's about more space. You know, we're taking the main theme from the song and just letting it run for about 4 minutes with a lovely guitar solo playing the melody and some lines in between. So we're starting to give sections more space and more time to sit in one mood rather than move on too fast.
Steve definitely, I think, gained in confidence, and Firth of Fifth is very much a Tony piece in terms of its how it started and how it built. But you know, Steve did let loose in, I think, probably the best way up to that point at the end.
Along the forest road, there's hundreds of cars, luxury cars. Each has got its load of convertible bars, cutlery cars, superless scars.
Battle of Epping Forest is a classic example of what I was getting at with Can Utility and Get 'Em Out by Friday, where we had very well recorded as well. I mean, I remember, I can picture this, we were writing it, and we had some really good counter polyrhythmic bits happening, you know. And then Peter took the song and wrote the lyric, and we recorded the track, and then he came in to sing the lyric, and we were just like, it's like 300 words a line, you know. It was like there was no space, any air had been sucked out of it. And not to say that, you know, he was in the wrong or we were in the wrong. It's just that if we'd have only known, we could have thinned it out. And those days we didn't go back and re-record things, you know. This is it. We've got our version, we have to make do, you know.
Home from work, our Juliet clears her morning meal.
The other song on this album, I suppose, that kind of was a big development for us again was the Cinema Show, which was another one of those things that starts off with a sort of quiet, you know, acoustic beginning and then ends up doing something else at the end. But I think the instrumental at the end of this was probably the best of the ones we did at this stage in our careers anyhow. Mike had this riff, which was just in 7, just going dang, 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 like that. And he was playing along. And, you know, I'd sort of just started fiddling around on top of it. And then we thought this could be really good. So again, Phil, Mike and I just went off really and put this all together.
Cinema Show was lyrically, I think, Tony and Peter. I think. It was either Tony and Peter or Mike and Peter. But anyway, and the end, of course, was just based on a guitar riff, you know, a 7/8 drum riff. And then Tony just sort of had lots of bits on top, and eventually that became the themes, which are very strong themes.
The first part's again another example of when I tuned my 12 strings. And normally you have got 12 strings and they're paired up, and you tune each pair to the same note. I started tuning each pair to harmony notes, which is how the song starts with that sort of rundown. Now, what the hell the tuning is, I haven't got a clue, because the other day in New York we said, well, they were saying, let's do the first half of Cinema Show maybe, you know. And I said, well, all right, but I had no idea how I played it, you know, we had to work a compromised version out. But the second part, once again, seems to we started this move really, I think, with myself, Phil and Tony. And what was doing Steve, it's more about myself, Phil and Tony, playing, jamming and getting these instrumental moments, like, you know, the back end of the 9/8 in So I Was Ready, this one, which became a large part of our sort of our trademark really. And it was the instrumental part was a huge sort of crowd pleaser. Great live song.
This album, I think we came together much more as players. I think it's the first, you know, we sound convincing as players to a greater extent. In some ways, it was the most of the early albums. I suppose it's the most, you know, there's a bit more technique in there and stuff. I always like to think the technique is just another sort of paintbrush in a way. It's something you can use, and it can be very effective at times. You should never take over.
I do look back on this one with fondness, although I think the others, I suspect Tony and Mike might have felt that the songs weren't as strong on it. I felt that it was an album that was big on atmosphere, very well arranged, very well played, lots of very interesting techniques, and everyone, you know, playing and toying with things.
I always liken Semi-England and Nursery Crime as sort of similar feeling albums in my mind. I think the good bits are good and the bad bits are a bit dodgy, but I think there's some strong bits there, definitely. And of course our first semi-hit single, almost. Who'd have thought?
There were things that I was less happy with than others, and obviously I think, yeah, you follow your own bits and pieces further through than everybody else's, but it's I think some of them could have been a bit sharper. I mean, for example, I mentioned the chorus of Know What I Like, which didn't last for me as a pleasurable experience, even though, it got us a hit.